Hey guys, and welcome to part 3 of this Unity tutorial series. In the last episode we covered spawning minions in the base and then having them path throughout the map, as you can see here, pathing from the spawns here and here and going down the individual lanes. What we're going to do this episode is tackle minion interactions. So as they pass one another, they're going to want to move towards their closest target, keep a list of which minions are nearby so they can prioritize the closest target, and then also when they killed the minion that they're attacking, either move on to the next target in the list or continue down the destination that we set for them. For example, mid lane minions will go along this path, and obviously bot lane and top lane along these other two paths. One of the first things I will want to do is just to clean up a bit of what we did last episode. So I'm going to go into the minion script that we made last episode, and I'm just going to set up two public variables. These are going to be materials, and we're going to name one blue mat. We'll call it blue minion mat, and we'll make another one and we'll call it red minion mat. And what this is for is just to set up the material on the minion without using two separate prefabs like we did last episode. So we'll just also want to go into the start function and say, oh yeah, we'll want a public bool that just says is blue. And this is just going to be true if the minion's spawning on the blue side, and it's going to be false if it's spawning on the red side. So we'll say if is blue, this dot game object dot get component, and we'll need the renderer, and we'll just set the material to the blue minion mat. And we'll set up an else. So if this statement is not true, so the only other possibility is it's false, then we'll do the same as here, but we'll just set it as red minion material. And this should be pretty straightforward. If we go back into the engine, and we also want to open up our game manager, because what we'll need to do is when we spawn these minions, when we instantiate them, we'll need to set up the fact that they're either spawning in the red spawn or blue spawn. We'll need to define, so basically we need to define whether they're blue side or red side in here by changing this public bool. The other thing I want to fix as well is to make all of these just the minion prefab. So we'll just go minion prefab, and all of these instantiates. So that's fine. So they're all spawning the same prefab, and we'll just need to say that on this script, we'll set the is blue to true for the three we spawn on this side, and we'll just set it for false on all the other ones. So we'll just take this and say this and this, and on this side we'll set it as false. One way we'll probably clean this up in future is we'll just reference the component once, and we won't use the get component several times. But for now, it should be okay and won't cause any performance issues. I'll just need to set both of these to false. So it's just a thing to think about in cleaning up our code at a later date. So this should be fine. So if we go back into the engine, I go to the Minion AI script. In fact, I'm just going to pull out the prefab just so we can go in, and let's see, here's the script. So you can see we'll need to set up these two materials. So we'll say blue here, red here, and we'll save this on the prefab so we'll always know which ones to gather, which materials to assign. And then now if we just delete this prefab, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. If we delete the prefab, save, press play. And then if we go to the scene mode, scroll out, it will look the same as before, but essentially all of these are now just a single prefab with a different material assigned. So these ones are blue and these ones are red. So that's perfect. And that simplifies what we're going to be doing on this next stage, which is we're going to have to put a targeting system on our prefab. So having two prefabs ultimately would make that just having to copy and paste a bunch of code or having to copy a bunch of stuff. And in doing that process, it's very easy to make mistakes. So we can delete the red minion prefab because we no longer need that. And we'll just pull out the standard minion prefab once again. And I'm just going to go inside it. And here we're going to want to create a empty object. No, we want to create a cylinder, I believe. And if we scroll down and just, in fact, we can just do this to zoom into the object. We're going to want to make this as large as, sorry, we want to just change the cylinder size, and we want to make it as large as the area that the minion can target. Now we don't need the mesh renderer, so we can just remove that component. The only thing we're really looking for is this capsule collider. And this is going to be the area in which any other minions enter. They will be a viable target for this minion. And then they'll set their destination to move towards them. And then we'll go through either an attack function or an attack animation, and then sending damage variables back and forth. So we know how much health they have, how much damage they've taken, and whatnot. So this looks roughly a fine size for now, and we can always play with the size later by going into the collider editor, and it's just a simple capsule collider that we have on here. We're going to want to take it as a trigger because we don't actually want this to work as a collider where if it collides with something, there's essentially a physical interaction. This is just a trigger so we know when stuff has entered a certain distance to the minion prefab. Just rename this target collider. That might be fine for now. So we'll call it target collider, and we'll need to add a component, and this is going to be a script, and we'll just create a new script and we'll call this minion target script, let's say, and that should be fine. And if we just open up this script, okay, cool. And this script is the one we're going to be using to create a list of targets for the minion that it's nearby or has collided with. So the first thing we'll need to do is set up that list. So we'll go public list, and we want it to be a game object list. We're just going to call it, I guess, target list. And it's going to be a new list of game objects. The other thing we'll want to do is we'll want to reference the parent of this. So as you remember, this is a childed game object to the minion prefab. So we'll need to reference the Minion AI script to give it information. So we can say Minion AI script here, and we'll just call this Minion script. That should be good to start. And then in the start function, we'll need to say Minion script is equal to this dot get component in parent, and it's just the Minion AI script. And from there, we'll also, I think we'll set up a bool. So we'll say public bool is blue, and we'll just, again, get that data across to here because we're going to need it, is equal to the minion script dot is blue. So we're just finding out, you know, is this a blue minion? Is it a red minion using this variable? And then this will affect the code that we write later on. So what we'll want to do, we'll want to set up a method which is public void on trigger enter, and we'll just call it collider. And basically what this method does is whenever a collider enters the collider on this game object, it will trigger this, and therefore we'll be able to test what's entered and keep it on our list. So we'll want to say if this isn't on the target list and it doesn't contain the collider.gameObject, then, so this is just simply saying if this isn't on the list already, we'll want to add it. So we'll say target.list.add, and we'll just say collider.gameObject. So that's very simple. We're just adding any colliders that come into collision with this game object. But quickly you'll realize there's a problem here, and that problem is that there's a lot of colliders on the map, the walls, the ground, and everything. So a simple solution for this is we'll just put all the blue minions on one layer, or the red minions on the other layer, or another layer. So we'll just say collider.gameObject.layer, and we'll say equals 10 because we'll be testing for red minions. Well, and it needs to be equals here. And then over here in the minion script, it's very simple to make sure everything's set up in a layer. So if the minion is blue, we'll just say this .gameObject.layer equals 9, and if it's red, it will be 10. So now on the defined layer, we'll make sure every collision that's detected is only for those layers. What we'll also want to do here is say if is blue, because we've pulled the parent script and asked if it's blue. So we'll only do it under this condition. We'll do this. And then we can do an else, which is basically, is it red? And if that's the case, we'll be looking for a blue minion, which is on layer 9. And that's very simple. Now, whenever you collide with a minion of the opposite color, they will be added to our target list. The other thing we'll need to set up very quickly is when they leave the collider, when they've gone out of range, they've left the target list. So we'll just need to set that up too. So public void on trigger exit, and we'll just call the collider. And we'll just say if target list dot contains collider dot game object, we just do target list dot remove collider dot game object. And this is very simple. It doesn't need any of the layers because essentially it will only, a blue minion will only add a red minion onto its list anyway. And if that then has left the collider, has left the range of the minion, then we can just remove it from the target list. So right here, we've set up our target list. Now, what I'll do is put a debug.log, and we'll just be able to see this interaction happening. So we'll just say, say added, and then we'll just say plus game object dot name. That might be simple enough. And we'll do this on both sides. And this is just to check that it is working as intended. We're just going to have to set up a few things so this all works. We've added these to our layers, but if we go back into the engine, we'll need to make sure that you've set up these layers for yourself. So I did this earlier. 9 is blue minions, 10 is red minions. If you just click add layer, you can add that up and then you can save that. Also, another thing we'll need to do is when inside the minion prefab, we'll also need to make sure that there is a rigid body on this object. I did that earlier, so that should be fine. And yeah, there's the rigid body. The nav mesh agent will take over, and the rigid body won't really be too relevant, but that's just needed for detection between triggers and colliders, the way we've set it up. But it shouldn't have too much of an effect. Now, if we just save that and go back to the scene, and if we click play, we're getting an error somewhere. Minion target script, line 7 and 6.2. Okay, so the problem is pretty simple. We just missed some brackets here on line 7. I think it's at something about line 6.2, but I'm not seeing that. So we'll just go back into the engine and see what it says. Cool, we're not getting any errors right now. Awesome. And there is this one minion that I had in the scene because I was editing the prefab. So you can just ignore that. That's not relevant. But all the other ones, hopefully when they go into each other, we're just going to get a little debug.log. Right, so these have collided. And then they've target collider, added target collider. And then when these ones collided as well. So that looks like they're adding to the list. I could put a debug.log to see that they're removing from the list, but I've tested this code already and I'm pretty sure everything's working fine. So what we then need to do is tell the minions, instead of their destination being, you know, these centers of the lane, and then once they reach the center of the lane to go to their final destination, we'll need them to switch their target to the other minion while they're in range of one another. Just like you would see in a pretty standard Moba game when minions collapse on each other or collide with each other in the center, and then they fight, and whichever wave wins that fight will push on if the player's not engaged with them. So we can take that from there. Okay, so now we're going to want to go to the minion targeting script again. So this is the script that is on the large collider that's detecting if it's interacting with any other minions. And we'll just need to make sure that we're using the Unity engine library and we're using the AI because we're going to reference the nav mesh. So another thing we'll need to do is say public nav mesh agent, and we'll just call this minion agent. And this will just allow us to reference the nav mesh of the parent. So we'll say this .get component in parent, and we'll say the nav mesh agent. Now what this will do, or allow us to do, is tell the nav mesh agent to set a new target when we're colliding with any other minions. So what we'll need to do is go to the update function and say if the target list that we have, its count is larger than 0. So that means the list isn't empty and there's at least one other minion that this minion can attack. Then we need to do something. And that thing we're going to be doing is for each game object, and we'll call it target. In the target list, we're going to calculate the distance. Now you might be thinking right now, as it's set up, why would we need to calculate all the distances? It's just one minion running into one other minion. But in the future, we're going to be in a position where maybe one minion's surrounded by like 5, and then it has to select which one's the closest as its target. And once that target's gone, we'll then need to detect other targets. So we're kind of just future-proofing our code and kind of setting it up so we can have multiple minions interacting at the same time. So if we go from here, what we need to do is set some variables. So we want a game object, and this will be our closest target. And for now, it's just null. I misspelled that. And we'll also want a float, and this is the closest distance. And right now we'll just set that as infinity. So, and you'll see where this gets used shortly. And we just need one more float, and this is distance. And we're going to set this as vector3.distance. And what this does is allow us to take our game object .transform .position, compare it to our target transform.position, and calculate the distance between them, which one's going to be the closest or which one's going to be the furthest. So from here, we just say if the distance that we calculated is less than the closest distance, which is currently set as infinity, then what we want to do is say actually the closest distance is now equal to the current distance. So the object we're testing, because we're going to go through each object in the list and it's going to run through this code. And then secondly, we're going to say the closest target is equal to target. And simply put, that will let us know which is the closest target. And then once all of that's done, we can then say, well, the minion agent, so the parent's nav mesh agent, we set its destination to, let's see, closest target. Okay, I just realized I made a quick mistake here. So what I'll need to do actually is say game object closest target, and this needs to be not a local variable, but a variable that's declared at the beginning of the class. So if we go there, delete this, then essentially what we've done is we've given it access outside of the for each loop. So if we go down here, closest target .transform .position, and simply what we've done here is we've taken our list, we've worked out which game object in the list, so which minion is closest to our current position, and then we've essentially changed the transform position. We've essentially assigned the position, the transform position of that target to our minion agent. So if we save this and go back into the engine, was what we've done so far, we should just be able to see as the minions collide in the center of the map, that because they're targeting each other, they should just move towards one another rather than continuing on their destination. So we'll just see if that pans out. I think that center minion got knocked, so it's just a bit off center, but it still should collide in the center. Cool. And the other prefab that we had in also made a target. And as these two collided and these two collided also, and it's updating, so essentially they're just pushing each other slowly, but that's fine. Okay, so currently we have two main problems we need to tackle. One is the minions are just running into each other and not actually attacking each other, and therefore if they're not killing each other, then they can't really get past one another and then carry on to their destination. The other one was that they were stopping so close to one another, they kept moving each other, so we would want them to stop a bit further away. But I think first we're going to tackle the problem of dealing with combat and health and making sure that they can fight each other and therefore carry on with their destination. So if we just reopen the minion target script, and here instead of setting the destination, I think what we need to do is actually say minion script, so we're referencing the parent script, and we're going to create a new variable in here, and we'll just call this public game object, and we'll call this target minion. Just thinking, did we use this name already? Target minion. Closest target, no. So we'll just say this, and then we'll say target minion is equal to closest target, which is the game object of the closest minion, and we'll actually get rid of the nav mesh change, or we'll cut it, and we'll be able to put it in the actual script of the AI. So this will just tell the AI, hey, this is the closest target. And then here, now that we have that information, we can do something with that. So what we can say is, if what we might also want is a public bool and say has target, and we'll say false to begin with. And what we can do also is minion.script.hasTarget is equal to true. So we're telling it not only what its target is, but that it has a target. And that's good because we can then go here and say has target. So if it has a target, we're going to set a destination of the target like we were doing before. And here we'll just call this, instead of closest target, it is target minion. And we don't need to set minion agent. We would just use agent as it's set up here, I believe. Yeah, perfect. So we've essentially moved that bit of code into the AI, and it allows us to then also say some other things. So one thing we'll want to do is say a public float, and we'll call this health, and we'll say it's equal to 100 at the start. And what we can then say is on the target, we're going to say target minion dot health, and then we can say minus equals something like 30. So we take away 30 health. I'm just gonna make that lowercase up there. Target minion, I guess it's get component. We'll need to get the script component, which makes sense. So we'll just say dot get component, and then we'll say minion AI script, and then we'll say health, and then minus equals 30. Now, obviously, we don't want it to just constantly attack, so we're going to need a timer as well for this. So this would be potentially it's a public float, but we'll call this attack timer, and we'll I think 3 seconds, maybe 2 seconds is good. And then here we can just say if we'll say attack timer, sorry, is equal to attack timer minus time dot delta time, which is just the amount of time that has passed each frame. So essentially what we're doing is saying the attack timer is going down by the amount of time that's passed each frame, and then we can just say a simple if statement, which is if attack timer is less than or equal to 0, then we do the following, which is the health removal. And so this is a very simple way to set the timer. We're also going to reset the timer back to 2. Normally we wouldn't hard code this number here. We would set up another variable and make sure it's all clean. But just as we're working through this, getting everything working, sometimes some of the ways we address things will be a little messy. But once we have the numbers and the variables all sorted out, we can kind of go back and clean up where is necessary. So this is pretty simple. It'll put an attack timer in. It'll do the attack every 2 seconds. We'll then need to say if the health of this minion is less than or equal to 0, then we want to destroy this game object. Oh, I think it's actually a bracket, isn't it? This game object. Cool. And now we can go back and just see how this is functioning. I think we'll also want to know about the health of each minion as they get hit. So we can just say debug.log, and then we can say health, and then plus health. And we'll just, that way we'll get a little reference to that. So let's go back to the engine and see how this works. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this prefab that I added in earlier. Just going to play the scene from there. And hopefully now we'll see the minions collide with each other and they'll be able to destroy one another. Hopefully. So let's just see this if it pans out. So yeah, the mid lane should collide first. Okay, so we're seeing health go down every 2 seconds. And good. So one of the minions was killed, but now we have a problem, which is the game object we were referencing has been destroyed, but we're still trying to access it. So this is a great example of how you may write code, it all works, and then you get to a point where, oh, if the minions are killing each other, they're destroying one another, you're going to lose the reference you had, and then you're going to have to set up code for essentially a null reference. So we can go back and do that. So if we just go back into our Minion AI script. Okay, so the solution for this should be pretty simple. What we'll need to say is if the target minion is null, so there is no target minion anymore, then we need to tell the agent that it needs to go back to its destination. And here we're going to encounter a problem. And essentially what this is when the agent is spawned, it sets its destination. Then when it gets to the halfway point, we set the final destination. Reason for, if it's a top lane or bot lane minion, then we don't want them just taking the shortest point to the enemy base. They have to go around top lane and bot lane. So what we'll need to do is set another bool, and this one will be public bool past halfway, I'll call it, and I'll say false. And just to point out while I'm here, a lot of these bools I'm setting as public. There's a good chance that when I go back and clean up this code, that a lot of this stuff doesn't need to be public bools, and that can just make things a little bit more readable in the inspector and in engine. And generally it's better to make sure your code is good for that. But right now, as we're testing things out, building kind of like a prototype of what we're doing, this doesn't look too bad for me, or this isn't the worst way to go about it. So now we've set the public bool that says it's past halfway as false. We're just going to go here and say past halfway equals true, and also do the same here. Past halfway is equal to true. And so what we can then do is, so in here, if there is no target minion, what we'll say is if the minion's past halfway, then we'll say to them, you know, you need to set the destination as the final destination that they've been fed by the instantiator. Else, they just need to go back to their normal destination. So we'll just say agent.set destination, and that was just destination. Cool. And then essentially all of this should work. So now that when the minion kills one another, they should just carry back on to whichever destination they previously had. Okay. And then we'll just go into the scene. And you're noticing probably that because I have the player there, that they're being knocked about, some of the minions, so they're not meeting exactly halfway. or when they're spawning, they're knocking themselves. Again, that's something we can address, but right now isn't a big issue for us. It looks like top may meet before mid. So yeah, they're clashing. We're seeing in the console that their health is going down, and we're also seeing that they have targets. Blue kills red here, but we're still getting the missing reference exception, so we'll just need to check out what's happening there. Okay, so I've just gone back into the AI script, and it's pretty simple what I missed. It's just here. So if has target, it's going to attack, and it's also going to go towards the destination. What I need to do here, if target minion equals null, has target also has to equal false. So it's saying, look, I don't have a target anymore, so I'm not going to run any of this code here, which needs a reference to the game object. But obviously if it was destroyed, there is none. When we're checking that we have a target and then moving towards it, we'll probably want to say target minion does not equal null. So that way, making sure we have a reference. Another mistake, just quickly, is this. We're destroying the game object in the middle of the script. So the thing we'll need to do here is just make sure that this is cut and then pasted to the end of the script, because it was destroying the game object, but then still calling all of this code. So that will stop that error message. Another thing I can do here, and what I intended to do earlier, was just say, we're only going to want to look for a target if has target. So we'll say minion script dot has target is equal to false. So we're only ever going to run this code if we're looking for a target. I don't need the semicolon there, and I'll just save out. And once again, if we go back into Unity, now what we should see is it all functioning fine. The minions are going to collide. Having tested this just a second ago, it seems like they just kill each other at the same time, which is fine for now, but something we will want to address in the future also. So, okay, red side's there. We'll also want to address the pathing and the fact that a lot of the times the mid lanes are hugging the walls and not colliding, which should be a pretty easy fix in the future also. So yeah, if you see here, those two minions killed each other, and I'm guessing, yeah, bot lane as well. Okay, perfect. I hope you enjoyed part 3 of this tutorial. We've started to get into some of the more complex elements of the AI. Obviously right now everything's a little rough, and we're still working on refining that, but hopefully in the next few episodes we'll be able to add towers to interact with the minions, and potentially also start getting the player to interact with the minions as well, being able to do damage and affect each other's health. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like, comment, or subscribing. Thank you very much.